Hi everyone, welcome to this Invest in Pre-Lease video, and today we are going to demystify regulatory and taxation related issues about investing in properties in India. This is for our domestic clients as well as the NRIs.
Hi all, we have CA Digesh Rambia with us, who is the founding partner of DMR and Associates, with over 17 years of multidisciplinary experience in corporate and international tax regime, income tax consultancy and litigation practice, business valuations and mergers and acquisitions, and due diligence services. He has authored and co-authored innumerable articles across various tax magazines, including the Bombay Chartered Accountant Journal, WIRC Journal, and so on. Welcome Digesh on board today.
Thanks, Rishi. Thanks, Raj. It is pleasure for me to be here.
Okay, so first question, can all NRIs buy properties in India?
Yes, most of the NRIs can buy property in India, except those people who are either a citizen or current resident of Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, China, Iran, Nepal, or Bhutan. These people are not allowed to buy any property in India. Otherwise, almost all NRIs can buy properties in India. There's one exception to this is they cannot buy any agricultural or farmland in India. Otherwise, all real estate, residential, commercial properties they can buy in India.
Who are or what is NRI, OCI, and PIO?
Yeah, so generally in a common parlance, there is a common confusions between NRIs, overseas citizens, PIOs. So NRIs are people who are Indians, who are citizen of Indian but not resident in India. So they are holding a valid citizenship in India, they are holding valid passports in India, but they are residing in some other country. They are earning somewhere else and they are paying taxes somewhere else. But they are citizens of India. So these are the people who are known as NRIs. PIOs are people who have now become foreign citizens. They have foreign passports, but their origin is from India. So either they were some time back citizen of India, or their parents were citizens of India. OCI is specifically a citizenship accorded by Indian government, where any NRI or any foreign citizen can apply to the Indian government and they can get an OCI recognitions. So it is an OCI means overseas citizens of India. So there is a specific category and specific permit given by the government of India.
Can these guys inherit a property in India, or can they be gifted a property?
Yes, both, in fact, all three, NRIs, PIOs, as well as OCIs can inherit a property in India, either from a relative or from a non-relative. They can also be gifted properties without any RBI permissions or government permissions. And yeah, I would like to make a specific mention here. In fact, even an agricultural or a farmland can also be gifted. Okay. Though they cannot buy a new agriculture or a plantation or a farming land, but yes, they can acquire through an inheritance. That's possible.
Can NRI invest in fractional ownership through SPVs or the company route?
Yes, NRIs, there is a general permission given by the Reserve Bank of India for NRIs to invest into the companies through share capital investment, through debentures investments. So all those investments is generally available. There are few exceptions to this where there is a list given by the Reserve Bank of India where in certain companies they cannot invest. In terms of fractional ownership companies, which to my understanding, what you're referring to is companies who are investing into a real estate properties, and whether the such NRIs can invest into such companies who are into a real estate business. Answer is yes, NRIs can invest into such companies.
And what kind of documentation would they need?
So generally for any investment, the basic documentation which is required is a permanent account number. If they are not an NRI, then either an OCI card or a PIO card would be required. Passport is mandatory. And again, those basic like address proofs, your photographs, and all those documents are required to invest into India.
So what kind of POA do NRIs need to issue?
So the concept of POA comes into existence where it is not possible for NRI to frequently visit India. So generally what they do is they issue, basically there are two categories of POA. POA means power of attorney. So there are two categories of power of attorney which is issued by an NRI. One is a general power of attorney and second is specific power of attorney. Now, general power of attorney would generally be issued to any Indian resident for managing the day-to-day affairs of such NRIs. So it could be like NRI may be owning a property in India. So an NRI can give a general power of attorney to anybody who is a resident in India to manage that property, to give that property on rent, but they cannot sell this property. So to give a power to buy or sell a property, you need a specific power of attorney. That's a basic difference between a general power of attorney and a specific power of attorney.
How much can NRIs remit in India?
So yeah, in terms of inward remittance, there is absolutely no limit on it. So NRIs, whatever they want, they can remit it into India. In fact, Indian government is more than happy to get investment from NRIs. In terms of outward remittance, yes, Reserve Bank of India as well as central governments do have certain controls on it. There are few options or few schemes available under the RBI and FEMA guidelines. One is liberalized remittance scheme, under which they can remit up to $250,000 every year individually. Other than that, there is a overall cap of $1 million for repatriations. So, and such repatriation ideally would be certain rental incomes in India, capital gains in India, or any other interest income in India. So if an NRI wants to invest such income, there is a maximum cap of $1 million, which it can remit outside India without any RBI permissions. In case NRIs want to remit anything over and above $1 million, in that situation, it has to take a specific RBI approval.
Are NRI, PIO, OCI eligible for housing loans to buy property from any Indian bank?
Absolutely. They are absolutely eligible to obtain the loan in India. In fact, there are specific guidelines which has been issued by Reserve Bank of India to such banks to give loans to NRIs, OCIs, and PIOs. Most of the terms of such loans would be similar to that what is available to Indian residents. Other than that, there would be certain beneficial interest rates available to NRIs. NRIs can take loan at a lower interest rate, but it all depends upon bank to bank. But yes, they can take a loan for buying a property in India.
What are the rules for them to repatriate funds if they've sold the property?
So as I said, there is an overall cap of $1 million under which they can remit or repatriate the funds. So suppose if NRI is invested in property which has come through its foreign sources. So there are two types of investment generally NRI can do: a non-repatriation investment and a repatriable investment. So for non-repatriation investment, so suppose an NRI has made a non-repatriable investment in India and bought a property in India. Upon its sale, that amount cannot be directly remitted without RBI's permission. You need to go to RBI and take a permission to convert that non-repatriable investment into a repatriable one. So that's one limitations there. Assuming if NRIs have invested under repatriation norms and under the when they have invested, that investment was regarded as a repatriable investment. In that scenario, today when the NRI is going to sell that property, the amount equivalent to the amount which was invested earlier can be easily freely repatriated. Anything over and above that amount would come under that 1 million cap. So that has to be taken care of. And again, if the amount is still, the additional amount, the capital gain amount is still going above that 1 million cap, you have to take an RBI. So let's take an example. So suppose NRI has invested, say, a property in Mumbai, say worth 1 CR. Now there are two ways where NRI would have got this investment type of investment. One would be a non-repatriable investment where NRI would have given this 1 crore or transfer this 1 crore to its Indian bank account, and then it would have been invested in that property on a non-repatriation basis. Now say this was purchased in say 2000, in the year 2000. Now today in 2020, if NRI sells its property say for 2 CR and NRI wants to repatriate it 2 CR abroad. So that first 1 CR which was invested as a non-repatriable investment, it has to take an RBI permission. The second one, the capital gains technically, the benefit, the gain out of the sale proceeds 1 CR will take the character of the original investments. Since the original investment was a non-repatriation basis, even the capital gain will also be regarded as a non-repatriable basis. So NRI will then be required to take permission for the entire 2 CR proceeds to be repatriated. This is one sort of non-repatriation example. Now, let's say again, in this example, assuming that original 1 crore investment which has come to India was on a repatriable basis. So today, and today in 2020, if it is sold for 2 crores, the original 1 crore can easily be repatriated without any permissions or any limit, any cap. The balance 1 CR which is earned as a capital gain. So 2 crores minus 1 crores, which 1 crore is a capital gain. That because it is under the $1 million limit, under that cap, it can also be freely repatriable, no RBI permissions required.
All right. So there are disputes, and even NRIs can get into disputes. So can NRIs approach RERA for resolving them?
Yes. In fact, all the platforms and all the dispute resolution schemes which are available to a resident of India is also available to NRIs. So even under RERA, NRI can make an application, can file a suit against the defaulting developer. And again, all other channels like City Civil Court, High Court, Supreme Court. So all those channels are available to NRIs, which are equally available to Indian residents.
So, how are NRIs taxed for profit earned from real estate, specifically taxation on rentals and capital gains?
Generally, when NRI makes investment into real estate in India, there are technically two types of income which will originate out of that investment. One would be the rental income and one would be the capital gain on sale of that property. In terms of rental income, irrespective of whether he is an NRI or a foreign citizen or OCI or PIO, he's staying in US, he's staying in UK, irrespective of that. If the property is in India and a rental income is earned in India, that income has to be taxed in India. It's very clear. Now that amount is taxed as per the tax slabs applicable to a non-resident or that person or foreign citizen. Now, in terms of capital gains, there are two types of capital gains are possible. One is a short-term capital gain and one is a long-term capital gain. Short-term capital gain is generally a gain where the property is sold within 2 years of acquisitions. So if I've acquired, say in 2018, I'm selling it before 2020, then this capital gain, whatever profit I've made on the sale of this property would be regarded as short-term capital. Now that short-term capital gain is taxed again at the slab rates applicable to the non-resident Indians. In terms of long-term capital gain, which is technically property sold, after 2 years they're acquiring. So, example, I've acquired a property in 2015. I'm selling it in 2020. So my holding period is 5 years, which is greater than 2 years or 24 months. That gain will be regarded as long-term capital gains. And long-term capital gain is taxed at the rate of 20%. There are exemptions also available, on a long-term capital gain where you can invest into another residential property, or there are government bonds. There are certain notified government bonds where they can invest and can claim an exemption. There are no exemptions available for short-term capital gains, so it is taxed flat at NRI slab rate tax rates. But for long-term capital gains, there are exemptions also available.
And how much would those slabs be for NRIs?
The slab rates are, so suppose NRI is an individual. So that individual, whatever individual tax rates are applicable to us, like 5%, up to 2 lakh 50, no tax, 2 lakh 50 to 5 lakhs, 5%, 5 lakh to, so the same slabs would be applicable to them.
So if I want to just understand the TDS provisions towards the rental and the sale of assets in India by non-residents, what are the implications of those TDS provisions?
So yes, so when a resident is making payment to a non-resident, and the nature of payment being rental or a short-term capital gain or a long-term capital gain, the TDS provisions will get triggered. So for a rental, when a resident Indian is paying a rental income to a non-resident, then the TDS rate is at the rate of 31.2% on the gross rental. If you want to reduce this tax rate, then NRI can make an application to the income tax officer for a favorable tax rate, and based on his income tax rate applicability, income tax officer can issue a certificate stating that a lower withholding tax has to be applied. Otherwise, if there is no application done to the income tax officer, the tax rate applicable is 31.2%. On a short-term capital gain, the tax rate is again 30% plus surcharge plus the cess, whichever is applicable. Surcharge and cess is dependent upon the amount of income which is earned. So broadly, like up to 1 CR, it is 2%, and then there's 12%, and education cess is 4%. So these are broad rates which are applicable for surcharge. But yes, the broad tax rate is 30% on short-term capital gains. And for a long-term capital gain tax, the TDS rate is 20% on the gross amount. Please bear in mind, the rates are on a gross amount, not on the capital gains. So let's take an example. If you have sold a property for, say, 2 CR, and your purchase cost was 1 CR, and assuming for the sake of simplicity, your capital gain is 1 CR out of this property, the TDS rates are applicable on 2 CR and not on that capital gain of 1.
Do they have to file returns in India for their property rental income and capital gains?
So general provisions of filing of tax return is also applicable to non-resident Indians. So if the total income earned during the year by a non-resident, if it is below the exemption limit, which is 2,50,000, then there is no need to file tax returns in India. But there are peculiar situations where there are TDS deducted, and even if there is say suppose NRI is earning an interest income of say 2 lakh rupees, and there's a TDS done at 10%, which is 20,000 rupees. Technically, there is no tax payable by non-resident Indian. So for to claiming that refund of 20,000, it may have to file a tax return. Otherwise, if the total income earned by non-resident exceeds the exemption limit of 2,50,000, NRIs are required to file tax returns in India.
Any common taxation issues one needs to check before investing, be it an NRI or an Indian, that he needs to plan or something like that?
So in terms of property investment, the taxation issue will only come on when there is a income. So if I'm going to make an investment into a real estate property in India, I'm going to see, or rather NRI is going to see, that what would be my taxation implications on a rental income or a short-term capital gain, long-term capital gain. But at the time of investment, technically there are no reasons to see on a tax part. Now there is a provision, specific provision under the income from other sources, where it says that if the property has been sold at below stamp duty ready reckoner rate, in that situation, whatever the difference is, that difference is added back in the hands of the seller, and the tax has to be calculated. So to just clarify you on this, let's suppose if an NRI, there's a property of an NRI in India, and he's going to sell this property. Now say NRI is going to sell this property for 2 CR, and the ready reckoner rate is say 2 crore 40 lakhs. So since the sale price is lesser than your ready reckoner rate price by 40 lakhs, that 40 lakhs would be added to his, apart from the capital gain, this 40 lakhs will also be added as a taxable income in his hand. But at the time of investment, there are no such provision where you have to see, what are the tax implication on investments.
So Digesh bhai, prices are crashing right now. So what if a NRI ends up buying a property which is less than the ready reckoner value?
So if an NRI invests into a property at a price which is lower than a stamp duty ready reckoner rate, the difference would be regarded as its income because it has gained that benefit and would accordingly be taxable in his hand.
So how would an investor look at an investment, be it an NRI or Indian?
So this is a general question, not regarded to tax and FEMA, but yes, I can answer because I am also an investor to an extent. So in that personal capacity of being an investor, yes, absolutely, I can answer this. So for an investor, what I understand, or rather what I look at is, the most important thing is the location, where the property is located. So that's one of the major thing, which I look into property, because the location will give me a rental advantage, will give me a capital gain advantage, appreciation advantage. So location, yes, is absolutely on top of the thing. Second is would be valuation of that property. If I'm able to get a good valuation, a good deal as compared to the market price, and yes, then accordingly I'll look at the investment. But if you see corporate investors who invest into real estate, and for them valuation is actually a statistical and mathematical formula. Just to apprise how it works is, generally there are 3 approaches where an investor look at property in terms of valuation. One is an income approach. So they will say that what all income is going to earn out of this property for the duration which is going to held, and what is my yield, what is my internal rate of return, and accordingly, if the yield and IRR is better than the other investment, they will invest into this property. This is one of the one of the most used method to determine whether the investment into property is a viable option or not. The second option is obviously the market rate, where if I am getting a similar property in a similar locality at X price, and if a certain property is available at discount to that price, and if that locality, obviously the location, as I said, is absolutely fantastic, then yes, a market, certain investors also look at market conditions and the market rate which the property is available. The third approach, possibly in terms which works more in under construction properties and warehouses, is cost approach, where I'll see what is the cost of construction, cost of equity to me, both, and I'll see that what are the returns what I'm going to get, and again I'll come back to my yield, how much yield I'm going to earn out of that, my investment, to my cost, to my cost, incurrence of cost, as well as my incurrence of cost of equity, and what is the income I'm going to earn. So these are 3 approaches broadly which investors look at while valuing a property. The third, I think, yes, the cash flows and the tenure of cash flows, how fast or how easy cash flows would be. So it could be terms of rentals, how fast I'm going to get rentals, how fast I'll be able to liquidate investment. So I think cash flows and profit opportunity is also one of the important criteria. The last and not the least, I think, is they will look at the age of the property, whether the property is a new property, old property, because a lot of other things will also depend upon how much the maintenance would come in the future, or will there I'll incur certain expenses once I buy a property. So yes, investor will prefer to buy new properties, freshly constructed properties will obviously on the top of the choice. I think these are the criteria where one investor should look in, and if if a property ticks all the right boxes, yes, they can invest.
Would you think that it will be different for a NRI? Any specific points besides these to keep in mind?
My experience dealing with NRI says that the most important criteria for NRIs is the safeguard of its principal amount. The return of investment could be at, say, it could be an attractive 6%, 8%, 12%, 15%, whatever different is. But the primary question they will ask is whether my principal investment is secured, and whether if tomorrow I want to liquidate his investment, how fast I can liquidate. I think this is one of the most important criteria for an NRI to invest into Indian property.
Again, with this NRI, when it comes into question, there's always a myth with regards to double taxation. So what are typical issues that one needs to look into when it comes down to double taxation out here?
So Rishi, you are right while mentioning that double taxation is a myth. So this is a myth which was prior to British era. I will say, because see, I'll tell you how it works. Most of the countries, they've entered into a double taxation avoidance agreement with each other. So like, take an example, there's a double taxation avoidance agreement between India and US. So what it says is, broadly what a double taxation avoidance agreement says, that if a person has earned a particular income in one country and it is paying certain tax in that country, then on the same income, even the residence country would like to tax it, but the resident country would be obliged to give credit for the taxes paid in the source country. So take an example, if NRI has an investment, say in India, say it's a real estate investment in India, and it is earning a rental income out of that Indian property, and he's also a US resident, a green card holder. So US is also liable for a worldwide taxation. So let's take an example, he's earning say 1 crore worth of rental income in India from that Indian property. On 1 crore, typically NRI in India will pay a tax at the rate of say approximately 25%. After reducing all the deductions, and approximate tax rate will come to 25%. So on 1 crore, the NRI will pay 25 lakhs in India. Now coming back to US will also take this income at 1 crore and say the effective tax rate for a US resident may be 20% there. So on 1 crore, the tax which US will levy is 20 crore. But since the NRI has paid 25 crores worth of tax in India, that would be available as a credit to him in US, and he doesn't have to pay any taxes. But yes, he cannot claim refund of that 5 crores from a US government. That is not permissible. What it can take is only the tax which is available in US, that credit. That is the maximum credit which is available, which is 20 lakhs.
Any specific tax incentives then for fractional ownership?
So in terms of fractional ownership, basically it's a term, fractional ownership. In terms means that there is an asset and there is a certain percentage of ownership owned by an NRI. But in effect, in a structure, when you create a structure through a company route or through a SPV route, it will not always look like the same way under the provisions. So I'll give an example what I'm trying to say. So say, let's take an example. There is an SPV, say ABC company in India, ABC Private Limited in India. Now it has invested into a commercial property worth 20 CR. And this 20 CR is pulled in by that ABC Limited company by say 20 NRIs from various parts of the world. So every NRI has invested 1 CR towards purchase of that property, and then that amount has come to ABC Private Limited either as a share capital investment or by way of CCDs or NCDs or various type of instruments, and then that fund is used by ABC Limited to purchase that property worth 20 CR. So what will happen is NRIs technically we may say that he is a fractional owner of that property, but no, he has a right to that property only through that share capital or through that NCDs or CCDs. So what he owns typically is share capital or NCDs and CCDs. Per se, there are no tax incentives, there are no tax benefits while you invest into a share capital or CCDs. And it is, yes, automatically, as I said earlier also, it is automatically permissible under RBI law where NRI can invest in such share capital and CCDs. Tax incentive questions will come in on the rental income or on the interest income or the dividend income at the time when the company will earn out of it and then repay it to the investors. But at the time of investment, there are no tax incentives available to NRIs to invest into share capital or CCDs as on today.
Super. So this brings to one more question, which fractional ownership companies get into. Is it the structure? So what is better, a LLP or a private limited as an SPV?
An obvious choice is a private limited company because it has a structure of shareholding. You can have multiple shareholders. There are the few limitations on shareholders, but yes, shareholding is a better way of holding fractional ownership companies. In LLP, technically there are no shareholding concept. There are partnership concept. LLP is more towards partnership. It's limited liability partnership. So for every now and then, if suppose a new partner is added, you have to change the partnership deed and all those compliance has to be taken care of. Even so, entry and exit is not easy in LLP. So there's not a lot of flexibility available in terms of LLP structure. But in company, yes, a shares can be purchased, sold. There is no need to make a separate applications or separate renewals of my main memorandums and association. So that way, private limited company is a better option in terms of compliance thing. As far as taxation goes, LLPs are taxed at 30%. Today, based on a suitable regime or favorable regime in India, companies are taxed at 25%. So even the tax rates under the companies, is lower as compared to LLP. Yes, there is also a dividend distribution tax payable in the company, which also add to the tax cost. But again, as I said, flexibility will play a important role for NRIs to invest into fractional ownership companies. So in that sense, LLP is not a favorable option.
So you spoke about compliances. What are the compliances that a domestic investor or a NRI would have to keep in mind while investing in a fractional ownership proposal?
All those compliances would be done by the fractional ownership companies and not by the NRIs. So the fractional ownership companies has to take certain registrations with the banks. So these are not approvals. These are intimations from the banks that I'm going to get share application money or CCDs from an NRI investors. NRI has to make sure that fund has to come from a normal banking channel from its foreign account to Indian account. Otherwise, all the compliance has to be taken care of by the fractional companies and not by NRIs. So NRIs doesn't have to worry about the compliance part. But if you ask me personally, it is always advisable that NRI companies should have one lawyer and one chartered accountant who is engaged by NRI for doing investment activities in India, because this will make a lot of life easy for NRI in terms of compliances, in terms of tax filings, refunds, and all other issues. So I think that's an advice which I'll give to every NRIs to undertake any investment. Before undertaking any investment, to have a chartered accountant and lawyer be available in India.
So they'll need to invest through their NRE account. Is that so?
So yes, there are two options available. Typically, it's NRE account or NRO account. NRE account is regarded as an external account. It's a foreign currency account. Though it is in INR, but it is regarded a foreign currency account. NRO account is more akin to like savings account what we have for a resident Indians. From NRE account, the amount is freely repatriable. There is no limitation. So earlier I've spoke to you that there's a limitations of 1 million cap and there's a limitation of $250,000 in the LRS scheme. So those all limitations doesn't apply on NRE account, but it applies to NRO account.
Now this brings to one more point, that is, can a fractional ownership investment be bought in the name of HUF or an entity other than the personal investment?
Yes. Fractional ownership can be bought by any entity. It can be bought by an HUF, be it trust, be it AOPs, BOIs, companies, LLPs. So anybody can buy shares of fractional companies. So absolutely there is no limit or there is no restriction on that part.
Is joint ownership possible for a fractional ownership?
Yes, absolutely. So what will happen is in terms of shareholding, technically, so there are two concepts. When you say fractional ownership there are two concepts in it. One is investment through equity, and one is investment through CCDs or NCDs. So all those debt securities. In debt securities, joint ownership is absolutely permissible, but in shareholding, you need to have only one shareholder. It cannot be in the joint name.
Right. Could you explain a little more about CCDs and NCDs and the, there's a coupon rate attached, and in what we understand is that for a fractional ownership, the money will come as interest income. So could you explain that for our investors?
Yes. So CCDs are basically compulsory convertible debentures. So when these securities are issued by company, it is regarded as debentures or interest-paying debentures. So these debentures will carry a fixed rate of interest, which company is liable to pay on the on year-on-year basis. This at the option, either of the option of the company issuing it or at the option of an investor, can be converted into a equity shares, and that's the reason it is known as compulsorily convertible debentures. So there would be a term sheet which would have been signed by NRI and company, which will detail on the terms of the issue of debentures, like what would be the coupon rate, when it can be converted into equity shares, what would be the tenure of debentures, what would be the price at which it can be converted into equity shares. So all those things would be mentioned in the term sheets, and accordingly CCDs can be issued by an Indian company to a NRIs or OCIs or PIOs. The similar things works for non-convertible debentures. So CCDs are opposite to NCDs. NCDs where debentures are issued, but it is not convertible. So for the entire term of the debentures, it will always remain as a debentures. So it will not be converted into equity shares. All other terms will remain same except the conversion part. There's a typical provisions under the FEMA law which says that CCDs are regarded as a equity investment. It is regarded for calculating what are FDIs and foreign investment in India's provision. The CCDs investment is regarded as an equity investment. But for all practical purpose, so your accounting purpose, your balance sheet purpose, your filing purpose, till the time debentures are not converted in equity, it will always be regarded as debentures or loan, a common understanding.
That's great.
So adding a little more to this, so what is preferred, a CCD or an NCD, and can they be listed on the exchange boards, or how does this work?
So yes, there are provisions where NCDs can be listed. But there are no provisions for listing of CCDs. But what can you do is, you can convert those CCDs into equity, and then you can list your equity shares on the BSE or SME or a NSE stock exchange in India. So yes, as I said, listing NCDs can be listed. There's a specific provisions. You can list it with BSE, you can list it with NSE. It's a less compliant procedure. It's an easy procedure which a company can enter into. But once a listing is done, this gives a lot of confidence to the investor, because since your NCDs are listed, there is easy entry and exit available. So as an advisor, I'll always suggest that if you're going to come out with an NCDs, a good amount of NCDs, it is always better to list it on the stock exchange. So it will create a secondary market for the investor to buy and sell those NCDs. So it can liquidate money easily, and new investor can also invest at any given point of time.
Thank you, Digesh bhai. That was extremely insightful. And, for all our investors, I think, the kind of answers that you've given, and, you've explained not just the answers, even in terms of the way you've explained it, I'm sure it's going to be very easy for all our investors to follow. And thank you so much. We look forward to having another session with you.
Absolutely. I'll be more than happy to help any investors, help you, because there are a lot of confusions there. And NRIs can do this, cannot do this. In fact, the central government is so open for NRI investment. They said ki jo aata hai aane do. That's what the concept and theory is with the central government. Right. So yes, I will always say NRIs that India is a good destination to invest, specifically real estate investment. Even in this COVID situation, the Indian real estate is one of the investment opportunities available to NRIs, which is technically, outcasting all other investment except the gold. Yes, you cannot control gold, because in uncertain scenarios, gold is a better investment opportunities. But real estate is coming on number 2 in India. So I can only say happy investing.